All right. Hello, everyone. This is Walter Bond in studio. And I'm excited today because, as you guys know, it's all about the mindset. And we frame it up as the shark mindset. So, what we did today is to invite an expert to come in and help us really unpack the power of the mind and what mindset is all about. And so I want you guys to be ready. I want you to ask questions. I want you to think, because we believe your mindset is really you. Your mindset is like an engine that drives you. And the stronger your mindset, the more successful you're going to be. And so today, our expert is Donna Marks, who has over 35 years as a psychoanalyst. You've been practicing, you specialize in addiction, anxiety, and grief. You've written a best-selling book. We're going to talk about that later as we close. Donna Marks, welcome to our show with Walter Bond in studio. How are you feeling today, and how's your mindset today?
I am feeling terrific. I am honored to be on your show, and my mindset is usually in the positive mode. That's for sure.
That's good. So let's get right into it. What's your message for a young person who's dealing with our environment right now, coronavirus, employment? I mean, if I'm a young adult and I'm feeling stuck, let's get right into it. What would be let's back up a little bit. Exactly in layman's terms, what is a psychoanalyst? What does that really mean?
Okay, well, psychoanalysis just means that you're already licensed in one of the fields of mental health, and then you've gone on usually for about 5-6 years of additional education, supervision, and personal work. And the thing I really like about psychoanalysis is that you do have to be in therapy yourself, as opposed to most other therapists. It's not a requirement that you actually have therapy.
And what led you to this line of work? Everybody has a testimony. Everyone has a backstory. What led you to become a psychoanalyst, and why not a psychiatrist? Why not a psychologist? Why psychoanalysis? If that is a word, I think I just made a word. But what led you to this industry, and why are you so passionate about it?
Well, thank you for asking. I was actually born into addiction and had a very troubled childhood. And I kind of became the therapist for my friends and some of my family members because I just had that compassion and understanding from having been through a lot of pain myself. And so that pain actually drove me into, my own addictions eventually. And I wound up getting married when I was 16 and having a child. And there was a voice inside of me that, when we talk about mindset, there was a voice inside of me that said, you can make something of yourself. You can do better than this. That marriage failed for obvious reasons. Someone that young, and my choice was not a good one, and one based on self-love. But I wound up going to night school, getting my diploma, and going to college, and I studied psychology all the way through. And then once I started practicing, I had my master's degree, and I was licensed as a mental health counselor. I realized that I did not really have the skill set or the personal growth that I needed in order to be able to really be as effective as I wanted to be. So I continued on. I got a doctorate degree and had a lot of therapy. And even all the therapy that I had on my quest for spirituality and my own recovery, I still wasn't quite there. So I went into psychoanalysis, and it really helped me to learn about it. I became a much better therapist. I understood how to get through the roadblocks with people, and my own blocks when they came up and working with people. But most important, it helped me to form a really beautiful bond with another human being, something that had been lacking my whole life.
Well, I see why we get along so well, because you're real. I mean, in a couple of minutes, you came out and let us know that you got some baggage. You came out and let us know that you've had some ups and downs, right? And so I would imagine that puts you in a whole nother space as you relate to your patients, that you can understand failure. You understand rejection. You understand making poor choices because your mindset isn't quite right. Talk about that. How do you approach your subjects, if you will, with empathy versus judgment? Is it have a lot to do with your past and you just really want to help serve people because you got free and you want to help them free? And how did your failures help you be more successful now? And if you didn't have those failures, do you think you could be as effective as you are?
Well, thank you. Well, first of all, let's talk about that word failure. In my spiritual growth, I've learned that I don't fail. I make mistakes and I can correct them. So I don't like to ever think of myself as a failure. My decisions were not in my best interest. So that's the first thing, is to, yes, definitely have compassion, because when someone comes to see me, I ask them, what is it that you want to achieve? And then we have to look at what are the patterns you're trying to break. And people who are stuck in patterns, or what I call addictions, usually patterns or addictions, not always, but what is the pattern? And then you have to understand how the mind is working that's keeping you stuck there. So yes, definitely there has to be a lot of compassion. If someone feels judged, they've already, those of us that keep doing the same thing again and again, like I did, and fortunately I've been able to break through all that. But those of us that do that, we already feel like as bad as, down deep, we feel terrible. And even though someone keeps doing it and you're looking at them, when you must not feel bad enough or you wouldn't keep doing it, from a therapeutic perspective, and particularly a psychoanalytic perspective, what Freud called, that's a repetition compulsion. And there's something in the person that's actually trying to master something. And sometimes we can't master things that are self-destructive. We will, it's kind of a built-in healthy defense mechanism that you don't need to master how to be a drug addict. You don't need to master how to have a relationship with someone who's abusing you. Those are not like life-enhancing mindsets, to use your language. And so we have to teach people what I do is teach people how to replace those drives of trying to overcome those patterns through mastering them, into mastering their mind, and to choose love over fear. And so,
Hey, so here's an interesting question. I deal with a lot of people, and obviously I use my instincts in the moment to be able to coach them up and help them. But I'm smart enough to realize that trauma is real. And you talk about healing the past. When you see someone who's been crippled emotionally, someone who's struggling with drugs and addiction, someone who's just stuck, how does that past trauma really impact the mindset? Let's go deep right now, because we have people right now that might not understand that being sexually abused is affecting them now in their 50s. And that might be why they don't trust people. Let's go into the past, and how big of an impact does a person's past trauma play into their future?
well, I feel it's very significant, because when you take a child that, babies are born perfectly pure and innocent. There's no agenda. There's no anything. Just, they want to be cared for. They want to be loved. They want to be nurtured. They want to be warm and close and noticed and fed. And those are the needs of a baby. And, this goes beyond just basic psychology. This is like survival, innate, esteem building types of consciousness. So when a child is abused, either they're neglected, or they're not fed, or they're screamed at, or they're physically abused, or they're emotionally abused, by parents making promises they're not going to keep, or telling them they're worthless, or you're never going to amount to anything, or they're sexually abused. And that could be just from, a parent relating to a child as an adult, or actually having sex or making sexual advances with a child. So when those things happen, every child has a natural kind of self-esteem. But when those barriers get broken, that child doesn't say, what's wrong with the parent? The parents are our first experience with God. They are it. We can't survive without the parent. So they don't say, what's wrong with the parent? They say, what's wrong with me? I'm defective. I did something to cause this. And it's tragic, because if they don't have an outlet for someone to tell them, no, no, this isn't you, this is your parent. You know, your parent does love you. They don't know how to show it, or they've been traumatized themselves and they're reenacting it with you, or whatever the case may be, to explain, no, no, this is not you. And then allow that child to grieve what happened and to talk about it. Because if they do get it out when they're young, it will heal. But that's not usually the case. It gets buried and buried and buried. And then that horrible original trauma is carried around, even though it might be in the unconscious, even though it might be in the forefront. Those messages of you're worthless, you're not going to amount to anything, or just the feeling of something's wrong with me. And sometimes they don't even know all these dots are connected. It interferes with the mindset of success, because there's that underlying feeling of worthlessness.
You know what's incredible is that, biblically, even the Bible says, confess your sins one to another so that you can be healed. Let's talk about talk therapy. I mean, think about it. Just by being able to talk about past traumas. And I want to really have another question as I explain this. These experiences that we have, it might not mean a lot to another person, because some people are so insensitive. They would say, man, stop talking about it. Get over it. Suck it up. Get tough. If the person is still struggling with it, I think that's insensitive, because talking about it is a way for them to heal through it and from it. And what I'm hearing from you, Donna, is therapists like you specialize in helping their patients talk about it, but talk about it in a way that leads to healing, and not just keep rehashing old wounds, old stories, old events. And a lot of things are very subtle. Obviously sexual abuse is obvious. Physical abuse, somebody just beat the crap out of me because their husband left them, is obvious. How about the more subtle things, like getting cut off the basketball team and feeling rejected, right? Not being popular at school and feeling ostracized, feeling lonely, and now I'm a loner and I just kind of shut down. What's the difference in that obvious trauma versus the more subtle things that we experience that can be afflicting somebody, and they don't even really realize that they're being afflicted because it's buried deep into the subconscious mindset?
Well, whether it's severe trauma or more subtle trauma, if it's repressed, it'll kind of show up in the patterns that are happening in their life. We become self-defeating, not intentionally, but again, like I talked about earlier, we're trying to correct those things or deny those things, and so we kind of get stuck in these patterns.
So let's talk addiction, because our society is very interesting to me. We have already labeled what is addiction. And we always talk about drugs, and we always talk about alcohol. And then you got the next tier. You talk about pornography and being addicted to other things like that. First of all, I want you to define addiction, but also give us a couple of addictions that people are afflicted by and they don't even realize it's an addiction.
Okay, well, most treatment facilities and experts define addiction as continuing to do the same thing and despite negative consequences. So
so stop right there. A person who's obese is addicted to food.
Correct.
And we don't call it addiction. We just call it obesity.
Right. And
one of these health fads, instead of digging deeper to figure out, why do I overeat or why do I drink so much, right?
This is so true. And food, well, I've done the research lately. 35 million people a year die from health issues that are directly related to addiction. We've got heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes 2, liver failure, lung disease, and almost all of those, not all of them, but almost all of those are directly related to someone who's repeatedly done the same thing in spite of negative consequences. They've repeatedly abused their body with drugs, food, alcohol, cigarettes. And,
sugar, right?
Well, sugar and bad fats are the two common things that cause these bad illnesses that ultimately lead to premature death. But no one's ever diagnosed it as you have an addiction. And so I feel that there's one addiction. It's that void inside that starts early on with that trauma, and or it could be later, but it's that void inside that something's missing. I call it the invisible hole, and it's always trying to get filled up with something. And until we address that, a person might get in recovery for alcohol, but then they switch to caffeine. Or they might get in a recovery from food and they switch to alcohol. Or they might get in recovery from drugs and they switch to pornography. I mean, that addiction is constantly, you know, like a hose coming out trying to plug into whatever it can. It's never going to stop searching, and it's never going to find what it's looking for.
The visualization I have is whack-a-mole. Like you hit this one,
absolutely.
Where else, right? So let's talk about anxiety.
That's exactly the thing I speak about in my book, a game of whack-a-mole.
Okay, we're going to get to your book in just a second. But okay, we got the coronavirus going on right now, right? And people are afraid and they are concerned. So this world right now, anxiety is on 10. Define anxiety. What is anxiety? What's the root of anxiety? And what are a couple of tips you can give us today that can help us overcome just some basic anxiety?
Absolutely. So I personally believe that all addiction has to be a spiritual healing process and learning how to love yourself. And I don't really believe that there's such a thing as anxiety. I think that's a psychological term that has sold a lot of prescription medication and a lot of booze. I call anxiety fear. And I believe that there's fear and there's love. I've studied many different religions, and even the Christian religion, it talks about fear and love. But I've studied A Course in Miracles, it talks about fear and love. So I just name it for what it is. I can call it anxiety. I'm actually afraid. And what am I afraid of? I'm afraid of dying. I'm not so afraid of getting the virus. I'm afraid of dying. Even though my behavior is killing me, I'm afraid of it. I mean, it makes no logical sense at all, and that's how addiction works. But concerning the coronavirus, people are watching the news constantly, and it's, you know, it's coming to get you. It's coming. The Martians are coming. It's coming to get you, you know, and you can't do this and you can't do that, and you should do this and you should do that. And then they're watching the news and watching it and ramping up and ramping up. And it's like watching a horror film, you know. You go into the movie with your popcorn and your soda and you're in a good mood. And then all of a sudden, by the time, you know, the movie's halfway over, you're shaking and your adrenaline's up. And this is what people are actually doing to themselves through constant, you know, addiction to the media. And when someone's doing that, I say, actually, your addiction is to fear. You're feeling all ramped up by this. You got your heart rate going. You're excited. You're talking to everybody. It's actually bringing you into connection with people. And so if you don't like the feeling of fear, you can still maintain that connection, but use this time, instead of being frantic and racing around to the store and, you know, not talking to anybody and, you know, total isolation and watching the news to the point that you feel like, you know, you're perspiring and your heart's going to come out of your chest. Use this time to love yourself, eat healthy, do some exercise, do things with your family, like old-fashioned kinds of things. Put a big puzzle on the table and put it together as a family. Play cards, play games. Have these kinds of conversations about, you know, this is an event of your lifetime. When the coronavirus came to get us all, and the whole world shut down, and your kids can remember everyone else was like scared to death, but we were playing games, we were cooking healthy meals, we were doing some exercises together, and we were playing cards, and my parents explained to me, this is an opportunity for you. We can be scared to death, or we can follow the guidelines, wash our hands, we can make sure we're not hugging people and touching people, we're respecting the social distance, but we can also stay calm and build better loving relationships. And parents can use this time to explain those techniques, those mindsets to their children. You can have a mindset when it's scary to use that scary event to really grow as a person and be healthier and calmer and more spiritually fit, or you can use it to go onto the whack-a-mole game. It's a choice.
Well, let me ask you this question, because I agree with you. You know, in 2010, I started telling people to turn off the news. And I get a little pushback. You know, people are like, what do you mean cut off the news? Like, I need to know what's going on. So what's the balance? Because the truth is, people are dying from coronavirus, right? So I agree, we shouldn't be totally ignorant to it. So how do you balance it? I mean, we're being told to socially distance. We're being told to wash our hands. We're being told to stay 6 feet away. We're being told to do all these things, or the coronavirus is going to get you, right? We even told this week it's going to peak. So what's the balance by us knowing what's going on, being aware of what's going on, but also not to be afraid of what's going on? Because yeah, I agree. If you sit there and watch the news, I mean, I think the number today is 16,000 dead just here in America, right? And I live in Florida, which is the suburb of New York City, right? So how do you balance that, being aware of coronavirus or some pandemic or some reality, and being courageous as this pandemic is present?
Well, first of all, I like to watch the news. I watch it a little bit at night and usually before I go to bed. And I also kind of tune in during the day to see what's going on. And so I think it's very important to be informed. I also like to watch the different stations so that I get balanced perspectives. And, sticking our head in the sand during a crisis is not a wise thing to do. However, in terms of being afraid of the virus, I think it's really important to stick with the facts. Now, some of the news, when they just report facts, they're not so scary. When you think about a fact is, I think is like 38,000 people died of the flu last year, and now we've got 10,000 a quarter of the way through the year or a third of the way through the year that have died of the coronavirus. It's not that different than the flu. So that's one thing. The second thing is, if you're healthy, even if you're older, if you're healthy, you might get the virus. There's no guarantee that you will get the virus, but you might get the virus and you're probably going to recover. They've told us that the people who die from this are usually elderly and not in good health. And when you really drill down on these places where people are dying in a large number, it's generally because they aren't necessarily even older, but they have health issues. The main health issues are heart and diabetes too, and obesity, addiction.
Okay, so let's get to level 3 of your specialty. Love it. We talked about addiction, and basically an addiction can be to anything, right? And it's when you keep doing it, even though you get bad results, you don't stop. We talked about anxiety and how we can just get obsessed with something, and all of a sudden we're totally convinced it's going to happen to me. Something bad, something negative is going to happen to me. Now let's talk about grief. I mean, because grief is going to hit all of us. And I lost my dad, and I can't hardly talk about him without getting emotional.
Mm-hmm.
My wife lost her mom, right?
Mm-hmm.
And certain even cakes that she used to cook brings us all back to remembering her.
Mm-hmm.
And grief is real. And
Mm-hmm.
I have this debate with people. When you lose a parent, my God, that is probably the most painful thing I've ever experienced. And I've had people who've lost their parents tragically and quick. And my dad struggled, and my mother-in-law struggled with cancer for years. I don't know which one is better. Both suck, right? So let's talk about grief. What is grief? How do we deal with grief? And how do you overcome grief?
Well, I think that's a really important thing. And whenever you've had a close bond with somebody and you lose them, your life is never the same again. And there's always that memory. And that is traumatic. That is one of the traumas of life, to lose somebody that you love, especially, a beloved parent, a child, a very dear friend, a spouse. Those are the really deepest losses. And it is trauma. And like with any trauma, it's very important that you acknowledge the pain. And you said, you find yourself crying all the time. That is very healthy, because when it first happens, once you get, as Elizabeth Kubler-Ross has, it's her model, is adopted by most people, is the grief process. You at first you're in shock. If someone dies slowly, that shock might have worn off by the time they die. But the shock And then, the bargaining, God, please don't let this happen. And, then we get frustrated and angry, and then we get depressed that we've had the loss. And then we go into acceptance. But if you don't allow yourself to feel the pain, whether it's the childhood trauma pain or the pain of a loss now, that grieving is important. We have to grieve. One of the things I say is God gave us tears to cleanse our eyes if we get something in them. But when we're sad, tears come popping out. So I believe that it's a God-given cleansing of the psyche, cleansing of the soul, to get rid of the pain. And if we don't allow ourselves to do that, whenever it wants to come out. Now, obviously, if you're in a very important business meeting, you have to go, if you can't hold back, you have to excuse yourself and go to the restroom. But if you're alone and you're in a safe place, let it flow, because you are releasing that pent-up pain. And it's so important to let go of that pain, because if you don't, what's going to happen is you're either going to bury it, and you're going to feel this underlying dis-ease all the time that you're going to want to self-medicate with food, sex, drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, or whatever. Or even if you go into some type of therapy, sometimes you can be locked in on going over it and over it and over it and over it, but you're not really grieving it. So once you grieve it, you are actually absolved of that suffering. And then over time, you do reach that place of acceptance.
Well, I'm very creative, and the thought that came to my mind, and this is going to be funny, and I think we should have some humor. It makes life a lot more enjoyable. What I'm hearing, Donna, is grief is like having gas. Just let it out.
Absolutely.
That's the best
and you don't measure it.
Right. So here, as we get to land this plane, a couple of really intense questions, because Florida is known as the rehab capital, addiction recovery capital. And unfortunately, it's gotten a little bit of a bad reputation for being almost like a hustle, where people are just having these addiction clinics and it's $30,000 and nobody's really getting delivered. And as soon as they leave, they're right back on drugs, but they check the box and it's an insurance game. From your professional experience, how do you know when someone has healed from the past, removed the blocks, free from addiction? And why is relapse so prevalent?
Well, those are two questions. Well, I can give you myself. I actually was in recovery from alcohol, and then my addiction kept switching around on me, to relationships, to excessive sports, marathons, and long distance bicycling, and then work. And I mean, it just never ended. So until I really did that deeper work and that deeper grieving, and then also developing a different mindset to choose love instead of fear, and to not keep doing the same things to myself, because some of it is just habitual. Once you've healed that pain, you also have to break the habit along with it. But it's easy to do when you learn how your mind is, the mind that tells you to do it is the same mind that beats you up for doing it. Once you're onto it, then you're like, oh, I don't think so, pass. So what happens though in treatment, and I'm not a big proponent of treatment centers because I think that they're missing some very important elements, but what happens in treatment is that someone goes in for 30 days, let's say, that's the standard protocol. And obviously if someone's addicted to drugs or alcohol, they need to be detoxed. So they need at least, a week to 2 weeks of detox, because you can't get sober on your own if you're, trying to go through withdrawal. You need to go through that in a medical assisted way, which is really important. But then let's say you're in treatment and they teach you that they'll touch on some of this stuff. You'll have some therapy, you'll have some group therapy, you'll learn about the disease of addiction, and they might take you to some recovery meetings. There's different kinds, 12 steps, smart recovery. Some of the better places have become more sophisticated in helping you to understand how, when your brain waves can get when they're overactive, they can actually teach you how to calm down your brainwave activity, which makes you feel calm. And again, if you don't love yourself and you're not connected to a support system, you're not going to stay sober. And that's really what's missing. They give people in treatment, they feel great when they leave. you know, they've been sober for a month and they understand the disease, and, you know, they understand what to do and not to do, but often they'll go right back into their same environment. And often, you know, they'll be greeted with you know, a spouse who's having their wine. Or they go to, you know, all my friends, you know, come out and have, you know, come out to the bar with us, you know, well, why don't you drink? And, you know, they're not prepared for this. And even if they are, you know, you're brand new sober. And so here's all these temptations. Or let's say someone has gone for an eating disorder to treatment. They come home and there's the cookies and the cakes and, you know, a total disconnect from the family of what's going on with the person. Another thing that happens in treatment, there's not enough engagement of the children and the spouse and the extended family members. Sometimes there's not enough leverage for the person to stay sober. And by that, I mean, is there a marriage or is there a career that if you continue to use, you can no longer, you know, have those things? That would be leverage that would help someone to be more motivated. But in treatment, you know, to just go through 30 days and then send someone out, they don't have the new support system. They don't have an existing support system at home that understands what they need to do, especially that first year of recovery. They might have a therapist, but they haven't bonded with the therapist yet because they'd met the therapist after they got out of treatment. So all these things are really obvious disconnects. You know, it would be like sending someone to basketball camp for 30 days and say, now go play with the experts. You know, like, well, where are they? How do I get there? Who's gonna, you know, it's just overwhelming. You know, okay, I know how to do this. Here's the system, but where's my support to transition me into getting better and better and better at it and playing the game on a full-time basis?
Well, you know, you just made a powerful statement, support. And, you know, when I think about my basketball career, oh my God, I needed support. As a professional business coach, speaker, I need support. I don't know how anyone can believe that they can be successful with anything without support. And I make the argument that even Tiger Woods fell apart when his father passed away because either he didn't deal with the grief or he just really didn't know how to recalibrate because he lost his number one supporter. Yeah. Right? His number one support system. So if you really do a diagram of Tiger Woods, it's probably a combination of both grief and also losing his support system as he deals with this pressurized business called golf, which requires incredible focus, incredible mental stamina. And he's the avatar when I think about how the mindset can be so powerful because he was the most mentally tough athlete any of us have ever seen, right? And we've seen him kind of fall apart. And he's getting it back together, you know. And he lives in your area, so hopefully we can get a chance to get him into your office so he can back winning some Masters. But Tiger Woods' mind is powerful. We all know that, and all of our minds are powerful. And I want to just thank you for coming on today. As we close, I want to talk about your book, Exit the Maze: One Addiction, One Cause, One Cure. What inspired you to write the book? Who is this book for? And how can we get our hands on this book?
Okay, so the reason that I wrote the book is because after working in the field of addiction for so many years and through my own personal successes and setbacks, I realized some very obvious things about treatment, and some of them I just discussed. I actually went to a treatment facility myself in Minnesota, and it was very good treatment. But then I came back home, and you know, there was that disconnect and that lack of bonding. You know, I often say people aren't addicted so much as they're lonely. You know, it's a substitute for loving relationships, and it's a substitute for self-love. And so I'd seen so many people that had gone through treatment, so many people even that I had tried to help, and there was just like these missing links. And so over the years, I realized that until someone learns how to bond with another human being and how to learn how to love themselves, that they were never going to really be able to have, you know, okay, maybe you can stay sober if you just go dry, but to actually be happy and to be joyous and to have that beautiful life of connection and family and friends and a fulfilling career, it has to go beyond just not using a particular thing. Because if someone, that's their substitute for love, and you take away the substitute for love, and they haven't learned how to love themselves, they have nothing. They have an emotional flatline. And what's the point? So what I developed over the years was every time I'm working with someone, is that a loving choice or is that a choice from fear? And people like, you think I don't love myself? I said, well, your behavior is indicating that you hate yourself. And they'll laugh,
Yeah.
but it's really getting into the deeper of like, if you want to heal, you're going to have to face that pain. And all my other therapists told me I just need to control my thoughts. I said, that's very important. Your thoughts and your mindset are extremely important, but you're not going to be able to concentrate on that until you heal this pain. So you have to have the courage to heal the pain, and then we can work on your thoughts. And even beyond that, to have a spiritual connection, which starts with learning how to love yourself as if you were that little baby again. How would you care for yourself as a young child? And that's how you need to learn how to care for yourself now. If you're crying, if a baby's crying, no one sticks a cigarette in its mouth or hands them a shot of whiskey. No one says, here, have some chocolate cake and start cramming it in the baby's mouth. Right. It's like you hold the baby, you tell them it's okay. When the little child's sad, you say, come here, cry on my shoulder. Yes, it feels really terrible when someone tells you you're ugly, and all of these things. So children will naturally get the pain out. So we have to be like little children now and just let the pain come out. And then we have to learn to love ourselves and learn how to have a mindset of someone who's going in a particular direction of self-love and fulfilling their dreams and fulfilling their relationship goals. And they will naturally be restored to that internal happiness that we're all born with.
Don, I want to thank you again. You have been an incredible guest. I've learned a lot, and we talk about the shark mindset because I know that the mindset is everything. I know in sports, I was around a lot of athletes who didn't reach their potential because it was their mind that held them back, right? And they had all the physical talent in the world, but just their mindset, some trauma, some past experience, anxiety, a lack of confidence, just really crippled them from being all that they can be. And I saw that in sports, and it's obvious because everyone can see the talent. But when I got outside of sports and got into the real world, to me, it's no different. Right. I see all kind of talented people, brilliant people, smart people, creative people, innovative people, underachieving, right? Because their mind's not right. Their mind's not healthy.
So they pull the rug out of them from underneath themselves when they're almost there?
Well, first of all, feeling the pain, is my take home, is that when something happens to you, don't blow it off, don't minimize it, talk about it, deal with it, but feel the pain. If someone hurt your feelings, know that your feelings got hurt, not just say, oh, I didn't hurt my feelings. I don't care what you say. That's a lie. That's a lie. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Who made that?
Yeah.
Who created that? That is not the truth. If someone calls you ugly, that hurts.
Sticks and stones might break my bones, but words might break my spirit. That's what I say.
Oh my God, just some things have been said to people when they're in the third grade by a classmate, by a boyfriend, by a girlfriend, by a teacher. They're still crippling them to this day. So we need to feel the pain. We need to address the pain, grief, anxiety, access our emotions, and get healed so that we can go and reach our potential. It's all about the shark mindset. Okay, so how can we get a hold of your book? If someone wants to come and work with you, how can we get in touch with the great Donna Marks?
Thank you. Well, before I say that, I just want to say every one of your viewers has a special purpose here. And if you're not feeling that and you're not connected to that, it's because something has stopped you from that. And so if you commit to healing yourself and getting this mindset that Walter's talking about, whatever form that takes, you have a reason for being here and you are worth it. And you're supposed to be here and you're supposed to fulfill that purpose. And you're here to love and learn and play and laugh. That's the only reason we're here on the planet. So if you're not doing that, something is wrong. There's lots of ways to get help. We are going to have an online course coming out in a couple of weeks on how to break patterns and addictions. My book is available on Amazon, One Addiction, One Cause, One Cure, and Exit the Maze. And it's, the hardest part of any of this is making the decision to go forward. And so you can sign up on my website, www.drdonnamarks.com. We actually have online Course in Miracles classes every Wednesday night and on Zoom. And if you're interested in consultations or courses or intensive work, I'm perfectly available here to help you. And Walter's got a great thing going on too. Whatever speaks to your heart. The right people wind up with the right helpers. So, but do it. You are worth it. And if you're not feeling happy and you're not feeling connected with life, there's something inside blocking you. And it's just a matter of removing that block and learning how to love yourself. And then you'll be able to love in such a passionate way that you'll fall in love with everything that you see. When I wake up in the morning, I'm like looking out the window going, thank you, God. In spite of everything that's going on right now, the planet is still a beautiful place, and there's beautiful people in it, and there's birds that are singing, and there's nature all around, and we get to breathe fresh air, and there's just so many wonderful things happening. And even people that have been in the worst situations, when they decided to step up into self-love and self-purpose, and the reason they're here, they break through all of this. So anybody can do this, and I just pray that you will. Thank you so much.
Donna, you said that we all have a purpose. We all have a reason why we're here. And I'm so thankful that you were here with me today because your purpose is obvious. I'm just really thankful that God put you on this earth and allowed you to go through your own trial and tribulation. So now that you can be a real down-to-earth resource for others who are seeking to get healed from anxiety, addiction, heal from grief. Whatever's holding you back from your shark mindset. Let's go help. And if it's not Donna Marks, go find someone in your market. I'm sure you can do Zooms. So with technology, I'm sure you can work with anybody in the world. I've enjoyed talking to you. I'm sure all of our listeners have been blown away by your intellect, your passion, your heart, your content on how someone gets free. So, hey, this has been another great edition of In Studio with Walter Bond. And it's all about the shark mindset. So tune in again. Make sure you click. Make sure you share. Make sure you give us comments. If you need some help, don't be too proud to reach out to Donna Marks. Make sure you follow us on social media. Make sure you join our masterminds. Make sure you join in our Shark Mindset Group leadership team on LinkedIn. We are here for you because we want to support your mindset because, again, a shark never stops moving or it dies. So if you're stuck, if you're stagnant, let us help you with your mindset. We'll see you guys soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.